Hello, everyone, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is January 16th, 2022. Thank you so much for joining me to discover the truth beneath the surface. I really do appreciate everybody taking the time to listen and for all of your wonderful support. So, today, what I'm going to do actually tonight, I had planned on doing a coffee chat today, but I didn't have the time. So, I wanted to provide a situation update tonight. And specifically, what I really wanted to hone in on was Michael Jayco's interview with Patrick Bergy. Now, I was listening to this interview this morning. And we all know that Lynn Wood has really called out General Flynn and caused quite a bit of a controversy within the Patriot community. And really, it's caused people to choose sides, more or less, or in essence, to kind of stand back, as I've done, and to reserve judgment and sort of let it play out and see what happens. And my overall hypothesis about this whole situation with Lynn Wood and General Flynn and others was that essentially this was a kind of a psyop that was being run to distract the enemy, and that the White Hats were doing this, and really that kind of a WWF style situation with General Flynn and Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell and all of them behind the scenes, actually planning this all out to cause this big distraction. For what purpose, I could never say. I could never really determine that, but that was just kind of my gut feeling at the time. But listening to this interview, and certainly in recent weeks, with all the information that Lynn Wood has put out, it's quite concerning about what the information that's starting to come out about so many of these individuals in the Patriot community that really we've looked to as leaders, even as heroes, up until this point. A lot of information is starting to come out, and Patrick Bergy has really been on the forefront, at really the tip of the spear, at trying to expose these infiltrators, if that's indeed what they are, in the Patriot community. Now, I myself can't say with any kind of certainty at this point whether or not I am convinced that General Flynn's a bad guy, that Sidney Powell and so many of these other folks in that general circle may be actually infiltrators, may actually be bad guys, so to speak. I can't say that I'm convinced about it, but I do have some very, very serious concerns at this point. Now, we've all known, and it's been pretty well discussed all throughout the Patriot community, all throughout alternative media, especially in recent weeks, that there has been heavy, heavy infiltration into the Patriot movement, and that there are a lot of people, a lot of influencers, a lot of high profile people inside the Patriot community who are plants, who are actually deep state. And I have to tell you, I remember thinking back, I don't know what it was, probably at least a few months ago now, but I remember doing a podcast and theorizing that when Trump came back, that General Flynn would be a no-brainer choice for a VP. Now, of course, at that point, we were at a very sort of different stage in the game, but it seemed to me to be an obvious choice. General Flynn is, he seems on the surface, he seems to be a patriot. He seems to be making all the right moves and saying all the right things, despite the fact that he's come out and said that there is no plan. And pretty much everyone's read on that up until this point, I think, maybe not everyone, but a majority of people, their read on that has been, well, of course he's going to say that. Of course, General Flynn, if he's involved in the Q plan, would never divulge his role in that plan, or would never divulge that there was a plan in an information psychological war. So that, to me, that was never really a stumbling block with General Flynn. I'd heard that he was a lifelong Democrat. That certainly, got my attention. But I also know that a lot of folks probably going to fall into that category of being lifelong Democrats. And then when they suddenly realize that the wool's has been pulled over their eyes for such a long time, that they finally see the light. And I, assumed that was the case with General Flynn, or maybe he didn't even share all of my political ideology, but he certainly didn't want to see the country get destroyed from within. He didn't want to watch a bunch of traitors seditiously steal our government, our republic from us, and enslave us. And to think that actually may not be true. I have to be honest with you. I've really looked up to General Flynn for quite some time now. And if that turns out to be true, it is kind of a dagger to the heart in a sense, because I really did not suspect that General Flynn could be involved. Now, I'm not going to get into too much of the specific details because I'm sure many of you in the audience have watched this interview, or at least plan on watching it and have heard about some of the information. So I'm not going to get into all the specifics, but more or less the case that, the hypothesis that Patrick Bergy was making, even though he can't really prove it, given Michael Flynn's extensive background as, being basically a master spy and probably the most qualified person, or one of the most qualified people in the world to run psychological operations, that there's a real possibility that the entire January 6th false flag was engineered, perhaps by Flynn and others, in order to obtain Nancy Pelosi's laptop. Now, at the time of the false flag, that got a lot of attention, that side story there. And my understanding at the time was that during the melee of the false flag, that they had special operators go in there undercover of the melee and go in and obtain that laptop that has, of course, I mean, we can only imagine the damning information on Nancy Pelosi's laptop. So that was my assumption, that was what was going on. But what Patrick Bergy seems to be suggesting is that entire false flag operation, to create all of that chaos and confusion, in addition, of course, to painting all the Patriots as terrorists. I mean, there are multiple different objectives in these false flag operations, as we know, but one of the primary objectives may have been to obtain that laptop, and that could have been not a white hat operation, but in fact a black hat operation, with people like Epps and Stuart Rhodes that are, now, of course, being exposed. And we know that this entire narrative, this entire plot, all of the truth is starting to come out. But I didn't expect that I was going to hear that General Flynn potentially might be wrapped up in this. And of course, it's not just General Flynn. That Lynn Wood has been calling out Sidney Powell, and he's been calling out a whole bunch of other folks, and really anyone who's in the immediate orbit of General Flynn. In a sense, I mean, if it turns out that he's a black hat, we can't necessarily assume that everyone in his immediate circle is, but it certainly would call them into question as well. And, I hesitate to start throwing around some of the names that came out of this interview because, again, I don't really want to smear people, especially when I haven't seen directly or haven't had a chance to research what these claims are based on. But it definitely appears as if there are some very disturbing things in General Flynn's background. And who knows, folks? It may be that he has been running this psychological operation for the other side this entire time. And perhaps when he comes out and he says that there's no plan, well, maybe he's doing that for purposes that might be a little bit different than my initial understanding. I don't know. But it is quite concerning. And I have to say that I always make it very clear on my show that, well, first of all, I make it clear that I don't expect that I'm going to get it right all the time. And I think I've even alluded to the fact that probably by the time this is all said and done, there are going to be certain individuals that, I was listening to and trying to gather intel from that turn out to be bad guys. And I mean, I guess in some ways I was expecting it. But for it to be someone like General Flynn, to me, it's kind of a dagger, like I said, if it turns out to be true. So I hope that it's not, but I have to tell you, this really calls, back into question Lynn Wood. And, this is something that I've talked about. Now, I've never had a chance to talk to Lynn Wood or interview him. I would love to actually have that opportunity. So if Lynn, you end up listening to this and you have any interest in having a conversation, I would love to have you on the show. But I've made comments about Lynn in the past, and ultimately my opinion of him has always been that he's genuine. And I've talked about his passion, and I didn't really know too much about Lynn Wood. I hadn't even heard his name before, quite frankly, before the 2020 election, and really the aftermath, because he really emerged on the scene as a leader in spearheading this effort, along with, of course, Sidney Powell and General Flynn and so many other people that I just assumed to be great patriots. And along the way, we've witnessed that there has definitely been a division within the patriot community. I mean, Scott McKay has been talking quite a bit about it. In fact, I think he was referenced in this interview as being, recently in the position where he's been kind of shocked about some of the intel and information that he's learned about people, and he's even talked about Kirsten W. And again, I gave Kirsten a really nice tribute on one of my podcasts. I stand by that because honestly, based upon what I was able to observe about her, I had great respect for her in the same way that I have great respect for so many of these other people that are being mentioned now. Sidney Powell, General Flynn, Ann Vandersteel is very close to General Flynn. Mel K is very close. And then, of course, there are people that are associated with them. And these are all folks that I listen to. And that I would be very kind of devastated if I found out that, these people were really playing for the other side. But it's also naive to think that this isn't what's going on and that the cabal didn't know that eventually down the road that they were going to need people who are deeply, deeply embedded in the patriot community, not only to provide intel to the other side, but also to sabotage the patriot movement. And, Lynn Wood, I have to say, as more and more information is coming out, Lynn is looking better and better and better. And his passion, when I saw him speak, I think it was at the Atlanta rally pretty shortly after the election was stolen. It's one of the first times I'd really heard him speak. And it was this famous speech where he got the crowd all fired up. And I mean, the passion was just shooting out of his eyes when he was talking about how, the CCP had picked a fight with the wrong people and that we will fight for our freedom. And, I listened to him and I got a sense for his passion. And I said to myself, a lot of people have called him into question. And, if I'm being honest, at certain points, I've questioned him and his motives as well, because like I said, I don't know Lynn. And at this point, I don't know who's who. And like you, I'm trying to figure it out. In fact, I'm trying to, do that together with you. That's really what this is all about, is trying to figure out the truth. Now, I've also said in the past that at the end of the day, the most important thing isn't whether Lynn Wood or General Flynn or Sidney Powell or Ann Vandersteel or any of these people are good or bad. What matters ultimately is the mission. However, the exposure of infiltrators within the Patriot community seems to be something that, looks like it's a white hat task that's been given to Lynn Wood. Because there aren't too many people who have the cojones that Lynn Wood has. I mean, Donald Trump has them. That's for sure. I mean, I think that we can all agree on that. But Lynn Wood, I mean, this guy gets attacked viciously, constantly, from everywhere. I mean, even within his own family. It's absolutely brutal. But he is a man of faith. And I believe he's a man of dignity, is a man of honor, excuse me. And I believe that he, in good conscience and good faith, is doing his best to teach us all and expose the truth to all of us. I mean, remember, Lynn has been saying all along, every lie will be revealed. Every lie will be revealed. Now, of course, most of the time we think about the lies of, the obvious folks like Hillary, and well, I call them folks. They're really monsters, but, the usual suspects, Hillary and Fauci and Obama. And, we think about them in terms of what Lynn Wood says, every lie will be revealed. But on a deeper level, look what he's revealing to all of us, if it turns out to be true. And I have to say, where I'm at right now is my gut is really pushing me in the direction of, I think Lynn Wood's telling the truth, folks. And a lot of this information that I heard, again, I'm not going to go into great amount of detail because I think it's important that folks go and listen to this interview and make up their own mind and listen to some of this information and decide for themselves, because I'm not in the business of trying to smear people. I'm in the business of trying to get to the truth. And Lynn Wood and his passion, I said to myself, you can fake a lot of things. And I know I've said this before. You can fake a lot of things, folks, but you cannot fake passion. And the real recognize the real. And when I listen to Lynn Wood in the same way that you do, and I see his passion and I hear it, it's hard to deny. It's hard to deny it and to think that it could be anything other than authentic. And while I've had great respect for General Flynn and others, by the way, for their role, or at least what I understood to be their role in trying to restore this republic and trying to save this country up until this point, I can't say that I've ever resonated with him or some of the other people that Linwood is calling out at the same level. And on a spiritual level, I did feel that connection to Lynn. And the longer that I continue on this journey, and I think probably most of you in the audience would agree, the deeper we get into this journey, the more spiritual in nature it becomes. It's always been spiritual in nature, but we're realizing more and more and more as we traverse this path together. We cannot place all of our faith in anyone, in any of these people that we think are leaders. And by the way, that goes for me too. I mean, there are folks out there, and by the way, I think it's kind of funny because in the past, people have questioned whether I'm General Flynn. I guess some people think my voice sounds similar. Hopefully, this podcast will settle the issue because if I were General Flynn, highly unlikely I'd be discussing this on my podcast. So I am not General Flynn. I am just a normal, everyday, ordinary American who's using this platform and his voice to try to get the truth. And that's where my allegiance lies. Ultimately, it's to God and it's to the truth. And, and I think that's a very, very important lesson that all of us have been learning throughout this entire process. And it's going to be painful. It's going to sting for a lot of people, even within the Patriot community, even for the people who are already awake. Because in essence, I mean, I think all of us are sleeping at some level in terms of our assumptions about what's going on in the world. So many things are a lie. And that's why I think Lynn's simple phrase of of every lie will be revealed is so profound and so deep. Because I don't even think that we realize necessarily the depth to which we've been infiltrated, the depth to which we've been deceived by so many of these so-called patriots, these people who are posing as patriots. I mean, I haven't watched InfoWars for a long time. I used to watch InfoWars on a daily basis. And then, I'm not attacking InfoWars. I'm not attacking Alex Jones. I've even said in the past that although I don't listen as much, InfoWars was one of the first Red Pill experiences that I had, and I'll never forget that. But the reason I bring up InfoWars is because I remember when I used to watch it, Stuart Rhodes was a frequent guest on InfoWars. And I remember I used to really enjoy listening to Stewart being interviewed. I thought he was a extremely intelligent guy. I mean, I knew he had a background in the CIA. And anytime I hear that, it kind of gets my spidey senses a little bit. Because some people say, once a clown, always a clown. I don't necessarily think that's 100% true. I think that, just like within any institution, any organization, there are going to be good and bad. And there are going to be people who see the light and, are going to switch sides. I definitely think that's true. But, when you hear someone has that background and that pretty much everything out there is a psyop and everything is disinformation and propaganda, well, you'd be kind of foolish if you didn't at least question that. But I honestly thought that Stewart was one of the good guys. The Oath Keepers, I thought they had a really great mission. I certainly, at the time, I would have told you, if you wanted to join the Oath Keepers, you better be careful because there's probably a lot of feds who are trying to infiltrate it. But I didn't necessarily think that the feds were actually running the entire thing. I guess that was my own naivety. But the point I'm making is in those days when I listened to him, I found him to be very convincing. And I found him to be, I assumed that he was a patriot and a good man. The last thing that crossed my mind that he was a Fed. And so, if it turns out to be the same, with General Flynn and others that we, really do respect, I mean, it's going to be hard to deal with. But, we have to remember, folks, that what we're dealing with here, whoever is on the other side, whoever is in the cabal, and I'm not necessarily painting, anyone into that corner at this point, but whoever is, we know that what we're facing is pure evil, pure diabolical evil, and evil doesn't have a conscience. And for so many of us, that's why it's so hard for us to wrap our brain around the possibility that somebody like, General Flynn or someone, high profile posing as a patriot, could actually be so heartless and so cold blooded. But that's exactly who these people are. They have no conscience. They have no connection to source. The only thing that they know how to do is invert and to lie, and that's how they get off. And quite honestly, they're very good at it. They're professionals at it. They know exactly how to manipulate us, the good guys, the people who have a conscience, the people who have a soul and empathy. They know exactly how to manipulate us. And yesterday I was talking about Megan Rose and the interesting little podcast that she did, talking about the two competing energies. One is a controlling, manipulative energy, and the other is an energy of truth and honesty and freedom. And that's really what it comes down to. And the people that are operating under that dark energy. Now, not everyone out there who's being controlled by that dark energy is necessarily a bad person. That's not what I'm suggesting. I think there are a lot of really great people out there who have been victimized and captured by this. But the people who are operating at the top levels, the ones who are, the operators, the ones who are making these tactical moves against us within the Patriot community, embedded within the Patriot community. I mean, these people they really are completely sociopaths. They have to be. I mean, when you think about it, the Patriot community has come together. All of these righteous people have come together, and we're doing everything that we can to save our country, to save humanity, to prevent there being no future for our children and their children. I mean, we're doing everything. This is the fight of our lifetime. This is the most epic battle in the history of the world. And to think that there are people who are posing as our friends and posing as our allies who are that completely devoid of any kind of real human emotion, any kind of conscience, it's absolutely, it blows my mind. And one of the things that's hard about evil is good people really, we have a tough time being able to accept it and being able to accept how far it can go and how deep it can go. Because it's just so contrary to who we are. It's so contrary to our nature. God's people, naturally, we want to be honest. We want to believe. We're not deceptive. We're not filled with guile. We're not children of Cain. But the children of Cain, they have no problem with manipulating the children of Adam. And that's just the unfortunate reality. And so we're going to have to see for more detail to come out. And of course, there are probably going to be a heck of a lot more surprises along the way. But this is a big part of the Great Awakening. Yes, the overall mission and victory for humanity is the most important thing, but it's very, very important. I'm starting to realize more and more now, it's very, very important that we identify who these infiltrators are. And I have to tell you, folks, I mean, George Herbert Walker Bush, he famously said, if the American people knew the things that we've done, we wouldn't be able to walk down the street. And he was right. But I have to tell you, that's just as much true, if not more true, for the people who have infiltrated the Patriot community, who have earned the trust of all of God's children, all of the righteous patriots out there, earned our trust. And with that controlling, manipulative, dark energy, tried to lead us astray. I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to be those people. I wouldn't want to have to face the American people. I wouldn't want to have to face the people of the world, humanity, the people that they're deceiving. I really wouldn't. And, one way or another, we're going to get at the truth, folks. One way or another, we will be victorious. We, the Patriots. And I don't care who ends up being a bad guy. I don't even care if Donald Trump ends up being a bad guy, because at the end of the day, folks, like I've said many, many times now, I believe in the Q plan. Let me be clear about that. All right. My faith has not been shaken. I'm 100% solid on the Q plan. But even if, hypothetically, it turned out to be a psyop and Trump turned out to be a bad guy, like I've talked about in the past, ultimately, I know that God wins. And even if it came down to that worst case scenario where the real patriots in this country had to finally come forward and finally do something on our own and take matters into our own hands, which I am not calling for and I don't believe will happen. But even if it did come to that, I know that we're going to win. I just believe it because I know that God is for us, and if God is for us, who can be against us? Now, the Patriots in this country, especially here in the United States, we have teeth, we have weapons. I've talked about this many times. So I am not, again, suggesting that we should start thinking and moving in that direction. What I am suggesting, though, is how deep my faith runs in the American people and really in humanity as a whole. That I know, I mean, you look at all of the protests that are occurring all over the world. And you can see, folks, even the people all over the world who don't even have weapons. They've been stripped of that a long, long time ago, and they're standing up and they're fighting. And you know something? They can't even be stopped. What do you think? Just because they don't have weapons, there aren't guerrilla tactics? That they can't get weapons, that they can't arm themselves? Of course they can if it comes down to it. And so as the temperature keeps increasing across the country, I think the people are starting to realize more and more that the real power has to be taken back by the people. And yes, we always have to have leaders, and we always have to have people in positions of power. But we always have to be very, very skeptical about all of those people. And I would include myself. I mean, I'm just a podcaster. I'm nobody very important, but I'm out there. I'm putting my voice out there. I would tell everyone out there in the audience, don't just take my word for things. Go and do your own research. If you don't believe in the things that I'm saying, if I don't resonate with you, then that's okay. Because I don't believe in any kind of dogmatic ideology where, I'm not going to tell you who you should listen to, who you shouldn't listen to. The only thing I'm going to tell you is, what you should listen to, and that's your intuition, and that's your gut, because I believe that's ultimately what God and how God is communicating with you, is through that intuition, that most things that we need to know and that we need to understand, that God ultimately, yes, he exists externally, but really exists primarily inside of us. In terms of our intuition, in terms of our higher levels of consciousness and understanding. And all of us are learning to tap into that discernment that I talk about so often, how important that is, how vital it is. I mean, I see a lot of people out there who are just absolutely throwing their hands up in the air. The more the division is introduced into the Patriot community, the more people are just, either double and tripling down on, Lynn Wood or General Flynn, but, really just getting themselves into a tizzy over this thing and getting angry with the other side. Now, me, honestly, I'll be honest. I did have some anger when I heard some of this information. I'm not going to lie to you about that, but I am not going to be consumed by that anger. I'm not going to be led by that, because I understand that that's a trap. Where that trap is coming from is really beyond it's beside the point. I don't want to get locked in that quagmire of, trying to figure out, is it this guy, is it that guy? But it's very important for us to understand that we be led by a spirit of truth and not a spirit of anger, not a spirit of, getting so frustrated that we just want to throw up our hands and give up. I mean, this is the time, folks, when we really have to dig deep. And we have to perhaps, rethink the way that we've been approaching some of this information and some of these individuals and these people. We have to learn how to think on our feet and to pivot when necessary, when new information comes out. And not tie that personality, whoever it is, to the ultimate goal, which is victory for humanity. And of course, within this country, victory for the United States and justice. And of course, this is something that every single person in every single country has been denied for so long. And that is what's most important. That's what we're fighting for. It's not about whether or not, I mean, look, I've heard it said many, many times that it's easy to con somebody, but good luck trying to convince them that they've been conned. Because once you've bought into something, for many, many people, And by the way, this used to be me. So that's part of the reason why I understand it so well. Once you bought into something, your ego gets attached to it. And you don't want to be wrong. You don't want to consider the possibility that you might be wrong. And so therefore you want to double, triple, quadruple down on whoever it is that, you initially said that you wanted to side with or you believed it. But I think it's very important for folks to, be somewhat malleable in that sense. When new information comes out, I think it's very wise to have always your eyes and your allegiance toward God and toward the truth. And coming back to Lynn Wood, I think that it's pretty clear to me that that's exactly where he's at. I mean, certainly he believes in Donald Trump. He's been 100%, solid in his support of Donald Trump and his belief in this plan. But, it's not about anything other than, it's not about following a cult of personality. It's not about Trump. It's not about Lynn Wood. It's not about, General Flynn. It's not about anybody as an individual. It's about the overall cause, and it's about truth, folks. The reason that we're here, the reason that we're suffering, the reason that humanity has been brought to such a level, the reason that we've been really just decreased to the level that we have is because we allowed ourselves to be gaslit. And we didn't collectively stand up for the truth. We allowed them to turn humanity against itself. And in a lot of ways, I think some people are still stuck in that same mentality, even within the Patriot community. And I understand it because, I experienced that myself. But I think we have to broaden our perspective. And I would just encourage folks, we know that gut punches are coming. We certainly know that we're going to be going through the eye of the storm very, very soon. And part of that, I believe, is going to be the exposure of some people that, we really did believe in and we really thought were good guys. But the flip side is I think there's probably going to be some exposure of people that we assumed were bad guys who turn out to be good guys. That's also the flip side of the coin. So it'll be very, very interesting to see how this plays out. Now, switching gears a little bit to Trump's rally last night, I think it's pretty interesting. His rhetoric seems to be changing with regard to the thing that goes in your arm. And, some of the comments that he made last night really left folks encouraged, I think, in a lot of ways, because he seems to be saying now, where he was really heavy on pushing the vaccine, last night he seemed to be a little bit more reticent, saying that, we have a good immune systems and, we don't need this forced on us. We don't need this forced on our children. And, he's really starting, I think, to, at least with his rhetoric, he's starting to turn a corner. And I think it's a very interesting benchmark. And, with Trump, we always have to analyze his words, his statements, and try to figure out if we can glean any clues about how close we are to this climactic event. But I think his comments with regard to that are very, very telling, because as I've talked about quite a bit lately, that I think that Trump is making these comments about the jab because he knows that it's such an important barometer of his base in terms of how much they know, how awake they are, how aware they are. And, he keeps, making these statements. It's almost as if he's trying to rile up his base and trying to figure out, exactly where people are in their awakening process. And I've talked about this really, that when Trump makes statements that are pro-jab, really doesn't affect moving the needle in terms of getting people to take it or not take it. All it does is pretty much, it confuses the hell out of the enemy. And it pisses off the patriots, if we're being honest, right? But when you think about it, if you're Trump's enemy, if you're the cabal, and, the cabal puts out this insecticide, and your main enemy or the leader of your opposition, Donald Trump, is out there and he's pushing this insecticide and telling everybody to go and take it, but you also know that he's your enemy and he's doing all of these other things, that's going to confuse the hell out of you. And I think that's exactly what Trump has been going for all along. I think that Trump, in terms of his overall public persona, I think there's a reason that Trump goes on He was criticized a lot throughout his presidency. Why did he continue to embrace the mainstream media, knowing full well, I mean, on the one hand, he was calling the mainstream media the enemy of the people, and rightly so. But on the other hand, it seemed as if, I mean, of course, Trump did some things to kind of promote alternative media. He actually did quite a bit in terms of, granting interviews and things like that. But why did he spend so much time, sitting down with George Stephanopoulos and, and these mainstream media types, at least in the beginning? And I think part of it is because, Trump's whole strategy is to convince people that he wants to be a mainstream Republican. He wants to redefine what that means, but he wants to be, kind of a mainstream Fox News Republican. Now, I think that Donald Trump, the real Donald Trump, is about as far away from a rhino Fox News type Republican as you can get. But in order to game the enemy, I think that Trump wanted to, kind of portray himself that way and portray himself as mainstream, even though behind the scenes he's doing everything he can to dismantle the mainstream. And that is very confusing, right? Well, that's the whole point in the art of war. He's trying to confuse the enemy. He doesn't want them to understand, well, not only what he's going to do, but really what is he even thinking? What his strategy even is. He wants them to experience that cognitive dissonance. He wants them to experience that pain and that frustration. And believe me, folks, Trump is a genius. And he's been doing that. I mean, he turned trolling the media, not just trolling them, it goes far deeper, but manipulating toward good end. I talked about manipulative energy a moment ago. I don't think that's not the same energy I'm applying to Trump here. I mean, we're talking about war. But nobody is better at gaming and trolling and really shifting the narrative of the mainstream media than Donald Trump. That's why one of the reasons I believe that, Trump was anointed for this. He was chosen. There's not a question in my mind that there was nobody else. God raised him up because there was nobody else that could do what Donald Trump could do. It's also something Lidwood has talked about quite frequently, and I believe it. But I definitely think that we're going to be experiencing some major, major events in the coming days, specifically with regard to military action. I've been talking about this quite a bit. And I'm sure you folks have heard, one of the most recent developments, of course, Russia's making moves. Do I believe it's all part of the pantomime? Yes, but nuclear armed sub off the coast of the United States was picked up the other day, and there's, as we know, the talks, I think by design, of course, between the United States and Russia completely failed, and it seems like war is imminent there. War is imminent between China and Taiwan. And, I'm reminded of what Cliff High was talking about pretty recently, and some other insiders as well were talking about right around the time that we're in right now, the 19th, 20th of January, only a few days away into, the third week of January being a major, a major marker might occur in, right around this time. Now, as I always say to folks, timelines are always fluid. Every timeline up until this point has been pretty much, it's been wrong. It's been disinformation, at least we think. I mean, it's also possible that it could have been real, but had to be switched. But my feeling is that, if we know the dates and we expect things to happen, we know that the enemy is as well. And so therefore, it's got to be disinformation. But I certainly think that this big event is going to be coming very, very soon, and it's quite obvious. Now, one of the topics that I've been really, really interested in lately is the topic of Antarctica. And by the way, once again, I have to apologize to David Hatcher Childress. I kept saying yesterday David Fisher Childress when I did my podcast, and then I think yesterday when I went to apologize about getting his name wrong, I think I got it wrong yet again. So I felt quite badly about that. So it's David Hatcher Childress, who is the gentleman who put together the report that I used as a source for a lot of the information that I was relaying about what goes on or what's been going on, the history of Antarctica, specifically going back to the Nazi involvement around World War II. And Antarctica and Argentina, and how, of course, it ties into the UFO, all the UFO sightings, and all the, really what we understand to be really prima facie truth about UFOs. I mean, there's no question that they exist. And taking it a step further to discussion about Solar Warden and how Antarctica plays such a key role. And actually, in my research on this topic, I of course had heard of Brad Olson, but I came across a couple of his books and was a couple of his interviews, and really he got my attention, and I decided to reach out to him. And he got back to me and expressed interest in coming on the show. So we're gonna try to figure out a time to get Brad on the show to talk about this topic. And I know that he is definitely an expert in this area. There was an article recently that he sent me that he was quoted quite extensively, and along with Gene, of course, who is no stranger to the show. So I think it's going to be really fascinating to get Brad's perspective on what's going on in Antarctica. And I think the longer this goes on, the Great Awakening process, and for me, what becomes more and more fascinating to learn about is this all of these secret space programs and how they led to the creation of Space Force, and really just the mystery of Antarctica and how much has been hidden from us. I mean, I talked about some of the information that I've learned about, but there's just so much more. It was really just kind of scratching the surface in terms of what folks out there have learned about Antarctica. And so Brad is going to be able to give us, I'm sure, a lot of insight when he's able to come on the show. So that'll be really interesting. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but Gene Decode is coming back for our next interview at very end of the month on January 31st. So that is something that I'm going to be looking forward to. And then somewhere on the horizon, I'm going to try to get Cliff High on the show. So very exciting things happening for the platform. I just want to say thank you to everybody for all of your support. Thank you to everyone who's sharing the links and doing all that they can to spread awareness about my podcast and my work. I really do appreciate each and every one of you. You're amazing people. God bless each and every one of you. Hopefully you folks enjoyed this situation update. You can let me know in the comments. Make sure you join all my subscribe rather to my different platforms. I'm on BitChute, YouTube, Podbean, and Rumble. And like I say, please do everything you can to support my work. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you thought, and I'll be back soon with another report, God willing. Thank you for listening, everyone. God bless and Godspeed. Patriot out.